Of a Linear Circle, Part 1, Chapter 2. That child is insane. The years seem to pass more quickly as they grow older. Severus mentions as much to Nazar, who is completely unchanged while Severus is still trying to figure out how the reflection in the mirror could possibly be himself. It happens. The more you experience, the more your perception of time alters, Nazar frowns. It takes work to hold on to a moment, to slow it down in your head. You're young enough to learn the trick of it. You might want to practice. Severus finally begins to make friends in his own house. Lily doesn't approve of any of them, which leads to several spats, but they always make up. She has her friends and he has his own, but they still have each other. Severus has the feeling that Nazar doesn't approve of Severus's friends either, but Nazar never criticizes him for it. The portrait tries to teach him Spanish, which Nazar insists upon calling Castilian. It's a miserable failure. After that, they focus on Latin instead, which Severus finds illuminating and extremely useful. He starts experimenting with words as much as he does with potions ingredients during the summer months, creating new spells. Most of them are harmless, or irritants. The first time he cast Sectum Sempra, the results were so shocking that Severus resolves that he is never going to use it unless it is to defend another or to save his own life. Humans are far more vulnerable than solid steel. Severus finds a battered King James Bible in a free book pile at the library and takes it out of curiosity to compare it with the equally battered Tanakh at home. The results are interesting enough that he packs both of them away to take to school, hoping his mother and her dwindling faith won't notice. His father won't care. Tobias Snape is a lapsed Protestant that the church would probably refuse to take back. Sneaking into the common room on his first night of school after everyone else is asleep has become such a set habit that Nazar is always waiting for him. He listens to the first parashah of the Breshith with an air of focused delight, one that's always made it easier for Severus to read aloud. I always did want to hear the Hebrews' interpretation of their own text, Nazar says. The church always seemed to leave out anything that wasn't appropriately grim. You knew Jewish people 1,000 years ago? Severus asks, curious. I had the impression we weren't on this island. I didn't know you were Jewish. Severus rolls his eyes and taps the bridge of his nose. It isn't obvious. Nazar gives him a baffled look. What does your nose have to do with it? It's a stereotype? Severus grimaces at Nazar's continued look of confusion, but he still meets older adults who've never heard that word used that way. Racism? Oh, idiots, Nazar mutters. Besides, if you wanted to see some truly horrific examples of nasal protuberances, you'd find yourself a Viking who had had their nose broken 4 or 5 times. So, 1,000 years ago, Severus quickly prompts. There's been a few times when Nazar becomes distracted, or something. Whatever it is, it's blank and frightening enough that Severus doesn't want to see it again. 1,000 years ago, Christianity was still the rarest religion in magical circles, but there was still such terrible hatred stirred up against the Hebrews that they often didn't say a word about their faith. It was safer that way. Then the English banished the entire Jewish population from the Isle in the 1200s. For a long time, there were only Jewish magic workers in Britain, and still they kept silent for fear that a neighbor might turn them into the crown. I don't think anyone removed their heads from their backsides over that until the 1800s. Nazar pauses. No, I think the ruling was earlier. I can't remember exactly. That's annoying. Nazar starts laughing before Severus can finish reading the same passage of text from the King James Bible. Not what you remember, huh? Severus asks. No. Nazar wipes at his eyes with his sleeve, which is odd. Severus didn't think that portraits did that. Granted, Nazar's is the only portrait he pays such close attention to. Dear gods, it's like someone who used to go to Mass as a child decided to write down what they remembered. My mum says that's exactly what they did, Severus said, biting back a smile. He doesn't care for his mother much more than he does his father, but at least Eileen is intelligent. The man who wrote the first English interpretation of the book didn't speak or read Latin, and King James has this travesty attributed to him. That's funny. Severus glances up at the gleeful note in Nazar's face and notices the pleased smile on his face. Why? His mother was Queen of Scotland when the Witchcraft Act of 1563 was penned, but James the First is a scrawny little hateful. Nazar breaks off. He enforced it, and his nonsense prompted the English to create the same sort of law before Elizabeth's death. He was not my favorite British ruler, Severus. I couldn't tell, Severus replies dryly, and Nazar smiles. Severus always takes the second train on to Cokeworth, since his parents have better things to do than retrieve him from London. The librarian at Cokeworth probably screams in frustration when she finds the Bible again, shoved into the mail slot so that Severus could get rid of it before heading home. As he suspected, his mother didn't notice her grandparents' copy of the Tanakh missing. He decides to hide the book in his room. His grandparents were useless, hateful people, but Severus has the impression from a few stilted conversations with his mother that his great-grandparents weren't horrible. If a battered religious text is the only inheritance he's likely to get, then he'll take it. There are worse things to inherit than books. His father is already elsewhere for the evening. Severus once again hopes that he'll stay missing, but somehow the drunken bastard always finds his way home again. Two incidents happen in Severus's fifth year that almost break him. The first is the night that he nearly dies by werewolf vivisection. He hates that Sirius Black set him up for death, hates that it now means that he fears Lupin, who is at least tolerable among that lot of idiots, and he hates that James fucking Potter has credit for saving Severus's life. He absolutely loathes Albus Dumbledore for not expelling Sirius Black, as the school's own rules state should be the punishment for deliberately setting up another student to be murdered. The punishment Black gets is pathetic compared to the crime. Even Severus will admit that if Potter hadn't dragged him out of that tunnel after discovering Black's stupidity, he would be dead. He would have died, and Sirius Black gets a pass. Severus gets looked at by their headmaster as if he instigated and caused the entire affair. I hate him, he sees to Nazar's portrait that night, trying to breathe through a throat gone too tight. Which one? Nazar asks softly. All of them, Severus exclaims, and buries his face in his hands, but in particular, Sirius Black and Albus Dumbledore. Black because he nearly caused your death, and Dumbledore because he doesn't care? Severus nods. Yes, I don't blame you for feeling that way about either. I truly don't. Severus glances up to see Nazar looking tired, something he rarely sees. Nazar. Hate comes so easily, Nazar says, and it's so destructive if it's unleashed in the wrong direction. All I ask is that you be careful. Sirius Black is going to want revenge. Revenge? He caused this! Severus keeps from shouting by the barest margins. Yes, he did. He was caught, and he feels the burn and shame of nearly killing someone out of ignorance. I know the type. He'll want to do something to shift that feeling of blame onto another. Nazar was right. Severus just wasn't expecting it to start with Potter. Back to old tricks, and bullying like the werewolf incident never happened. Lupin avoids Severus like he's a plague bearer, which eases Severus's new terror of fucking werewolves, but doesn't solve the problem of Potter, Pettigrew, and Black in a mood. Severus loses his temper. He loses his best friend. He blames those four damned idiots, but he blames himself even more. I shouldn't have said it. She's right. Did you apologize? Nazar asks. He still looks tired in a way that's really starting to concern Severus, but he has no idea how to ask about it. What can make a portrait tired, anyway? I did. She said. Severus swallows down the burn of bile. She said she'll never forgive me. Nazar sighs. Children grow up, Severus. Severus shakes his head. No, you don't understand. Lily holds grudges, Nazar. When she decides to be angry, she stays that way. Severus' father dies in September, not long after he returns to school in his sixth year. He doesn't go home for the funeral. He doesn't care. He hated that man, and Tobias Snape hated him. He claims the title of the Half-Blood Prince for a reason, after all, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. It's his and it's him, and that's the identity he chooses. Nazar never mentions the Death Eaters, despite the growing whispers of their exploits. Maybe the portrait isn't aware of their existence, as Severus never speaks of them. In 5 years, he's never caught anyone else in this corner, speaking to the abandoned portrait of Salazar Slytherin's brother. He realizes that he's made a decision regarding his loyalties on the same day he realizes he's been avoiding the portrait. When Severus goes back that evening after the common room is empty, Nazar doesn't mention that Severus didn't come to see him on the 1st of September, or mention his absences at all. Instead, Nazar teaches Severus the only true rules of life as a Slytherin. Once Nazar, ones Nazar says that Salazar also followed. Do not maim for pleasure, do not rape. Do not forget those who gave you joy. Pay your debts. Do not mistake kindness as a form of repayment, and do not expect a freely granted kindness to be a debt owed. Remember that a Slytherin is cunning. A Slytherin finds ways to survive when others will perish. Severus realizes he's been fooling himself. Nazar is perfectly aware of Voldemort's activities and the names of those assisting him. I'm surprised you're not telling me to stay away from them, he says, aware of the bitter tone in his voice. The same air of tiredness is still painting the Tsar's features, but when he smiles, it doesn't seem as bad. I've yet to meet a 16-year-old who appreciates someone else making their decisions for them. But you don't think I'm making the correct decision, Severus accuses. I have no way of knowing that, Severus, Nazar says, shaking his head. I'm not you. The only person who can know that in circumstances like these is yourself. Severus feels his shoulders slump. I think I am, he whispers. I can't see myself making a different choice. Nazar nods. Then the only thing you need to remember is that making a decision today does not keep you from making a different decision tomorrow. Severus goes to bed still puzzling that one over. It sounded very Dumbledore-like, but without half of the shit crammed into it that makes Severus want to strangle the doddering old bastard. The day Severus turns 17, he doesn't see Nazar in his portrait. It's a rare occurrence, but not alarming. It's that night when Severus goes upstairs to the common room and sees the portrait frame still empty that he worries. Severus glances over at the other Slytherins gathered around the stone fireplace. They're all ignoring him. Nazar, he whispers. He doesn't see Nazar, but Severus can hear his voice, as if it's coming from another room. You're leaving, aren't you? Severus feels a sharp pang and flush of guilt. Yes, it's the right thing to do. Nazar doesn't try to dissuade him. He only says, do not forget what you've been taught. He swallows hard. This is the last time he's going to speak to the portrait. I won't. I promise. Severus joins with Voldemort's Death Eaters. He earns praise for not fearing to say the Dark Lord's name while others still cower. He earns esteem by flinging curses at the enemy, at Dumbledore's damned chosen champions, without mercy or remorse. He earns true interest from Voldemort by his skill in potions, his ability to brew new and interesting things that assist Voldemort's efforts to blood purify Wizarding Britain. He finds no joy. War isn't what he expected. It isn't glory. It's not what a Slytherin should be. It is imprisonment and terror under the guise of freedom. And Severus is reminded of that every time he sees the dark mark on his left arm. Severus tightens his grip on his wand before each engagement, remembering what the brother of Salazar Slytherin told him. He survives it when he shouldn't have been possible. He refuses to torture or take pleasure in the horror the way the Lestranges do. Bellatrix is the worst of them, and he initiates a friendship with her based on nothing more than the desire for her not to view him as an immediate, easily accessible target. These are all the Slytherins that Nazar watched in the common room for the last 2 decades. It doesn't take long for Severus to realize why none of them would speak to Nazar, or why Nazar might have been less than enthused about conversing in return. Then Severus, all unwitting, makes the worst mistake, one he can't take back. By the time the point of the prophecy becomes known, it's far too late. He's endangered Lily and her child, even Potter, who put in a bit of an effort in 6th year not to be such a complete prick. Lily will never forgive him, but that doesn't mean Severus forgets the debt he created by insulting her. He will not forsake her now, not when he's just broken the damned scales in terms of balance. Severus becomes a spy. It may be a vain attempt at mitigating the damage, but he will prevent those deaths. That will not happen. They're all hidden. They're safe. Dumbledore promised him, and Severus has no choice but to believe him. On Halloween in 1981, that safety is proven false. Severus almost laughs in shocked grief when Sirius Black is revealed as their traitor. The Potters are dead. Pettigrew is dead. 12 Muggles are dead. Voldemort appears to be dead, but Severus suspects otherwise. Harry James Potter, Lily's child, is still alive. Severus barely recalls promising to look after Lily's child. He'll do it, no matter what sort of boy the child becomes in 10 years. He owes Lily that. Her death is his fault, his foolishness. He honestly does not know how to bear this sort of pain. Dumbledore acknowledges Severus's skill in potions in a way that Slughorn never did. Severus is certified, published, and officially installed in a teaching position in Hogwarts by the beginning of 1982. By the end of term, Slughorn is announcing his retirement. Severus is relieved to be rid of the old fool, until Dumbledore turns around and names Severus as head of Slytherin House. There is no one else, Dumbledore says sadly, while Severus stares at him in disbelief. He is 22 years old. The old man has lost his bloody mind. All the Slytherins of your year, as above and below, turned to Voldemort. They either remained loyal to their Dark Lord throughout the war, or they are deceased. There is only you, Severus. I believe you know how to be a true Slytherin. Severus nods. He does know. He's had that lesson ground into his soul in the harshest manner possible. When everyone is gone for the summer, he finally ventures into the Slytherin common room. He stares at a space that is both familiar and foreign. He hasn't been in this room since January of 1977. It takes a ridiculous amount of mental fortitude to dare the shadowed corner of the common room. He can see the painted house with its hint of sunlight highlighted back garden outside. The rooms that disappear beneath the edges of the frame, but not its occupant. Severus's Spanish never progressed beyond the basics, despite his knowledge of Latin. He can speak just enough to seek out another. Nazar Halivolt Slytherin, estás ahí, amigo? To his surprise, he hears a door slam. The Nazar is there, up close, staring back at him. Severus? Severus can't talk. He didn't expect the portrait to respond at all, or to look so distressed, like it's been years of concern and worry. Nazar finally smiles. You survived. That finally makes the words pour forth. I fucked up. I forgot to remember those who brought me joy, and now she's gone. Nazar closes his eyes, but he doesn't turn away. I'm so sorry. I'm still grateful that you survived, that you're here. Even why? Severus tries to smile, but it probably resembles a grimace. I'm the only Slytherin remaining of the right age and experience, too. I'm the new head of our house, Nazar. Nazar blinks and offers them a wide-eyed stare before brushing his hands through his curling brown hair. That's all right. I didn't expect that. What are you going to do, Severus? He's embarrassed when the words stick in his throat. I was wondering if I could move your portrait. Nazar is shocked for the second time in less than a minute. It would be entertaining if Severus didn't feel so wretched. Move my portrait? Where? Severus tilts his head in the direction of the common room fireplace. Above the mantelpiece. The Slytherins that return. They should know you exist. They should know the brother of Salazar Slytherin. Besides, you're a bit more personable than he is. He did get a bit touchy when he got older, I remember. I remember that. Nazar frowns. Do I? Oh, well, I suppose it doesn't matter, Severus. My portrait can be moved, then by all means, I'd like to better see those who you are going to call your own. They are going to be, aren't they? Severus whispers, trying not to let on how much he just wants to find a washroom and vomit. They're going to be mine. That is what a head of house is for, yes. They claim what is theirs and make certain the Slytherins they raise are worthy of the name, Nazar says. Severus sits down in the green armchair, which feels so much smaller than it did when he first discovered it in 1971. I can't. I can't do it properly, he says, explaining the task he's been given and how long it might last. Severus tells Nazar that he has to appear to be loyal to both sides, and those who follow Voldemort will expect certain behavior from him. Nazar is sitting down in his chair, his chin resting on his hands as he regards Severus. Do what you have to do, he says. I've learned quite a bit about the man Voldemort became from the Slytherins that muttered about him after you left. I heard more of the war than you might realize. Put me above the mantelpiece, where I can speak to your Slytherin, Severus. I will attempt to do what you cannot. Severus nods. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. They are my Slytherins, too, Nazar says in sudden fierceness. My house. This is not about payment, but about protecting their future. No one else will feel that way. Then fuck them, Nazar says crossly. They can go eat a blasted salamander and shit fire. Severus stares at the portrait. I've never once heard you swear before. Nazar snorts in dry amusement. You were underage. Severus nods in rueful acknowledgement. I'm not sure if I can do this, he admits. Nazar seems to sigh before he reaches out and places his hand against the canvas, as if he's pressing his palm to glass. The movement makes his hand larger, nearly life-sized, and reveals scars as well as the lines on his palm. Go on, touch. Severus hesitates. One of the rules of Hogwarts drills into students is that one does not touch the portraits, lest the oils in human hands damage the paint. Nazar is insistent. Severus gives in and presses his hand to the portrait's palm. He doesn't feel anything magical, nothing beneath his hands but paint and canvas. But he does feel reassured. It's an odd but welcome sensation. You can do this, Nazar tells him in a soft voice. You are a Slytherin, one strengthened by war and toughened by the harshest lessons one can face. Now move this stupid frame over to the fireplace and let me yell at these young idiots when they stray too far from a Slytherin's path. Should I find a portrait of Salazar to assist? Severus asks. Nazar draws back and resumes his seat before shaking his head. Not unless you can find one of his portraits that hasn't been tampered with. Tampered with? Severus frowns. What do you mean? Mistranslation, tampering. Perhaps it was an honest mistake, I don't know. Nazar sighs audibly. Salazar preached pure blood ideology, but he wasn't referring to magicians carrying marrying to produce more magic workers. He was referring to pure magical blood. He wanted only those of magical blood in Hogwarts. That isn't a matter of lineage, but of ability. I don't understand. No, I'm realizing that now, and far too late besides, Nazar says. For Hogwarts' first few years, our caretakers and our assistants were non-magical, Severus. Then one of them betrayed us in a terrible way, and it caused the death of a student. After that, Salazar wanted the castle to be free of non-magical influence. We eventually agreed with him. The anti-magic sentiment in the area was growing as word of the foul deeds of evil magic workers spread across the Isles. Hiding seemed to be the wiser idea, so hiding the castle is what we did. You couldn't have mentioned this years ago? Severus asks. Nazar lifted his hands, a helpless expression on his face. Severus, I thought you knew. You're a half-blood. I would have thought it obvious. Muggle-borns and half-bloods outnumber the purebloods in Slytherin, just like they do in every other house. The Sorting Hat says only those of pure blood are welcome in Slytherin House. Severus whispers, feeling like his world is turned upside down yet again. And it's correct, isn't it? Nazar points out. Pure magical blood. Hell, Severus, I'm a half-blood, so is Salazar. Severus gazes at him in sheer disbelief. What? Yes, half-bloods. Nazar shoves at his hair again when it falls forward over his eyes. Gods, I'm sorry. If I'd realized you hadn't made the connection, that you hadn't realized the true reason you were sorted into our house. Severus shakes his head. No, don't. It's over and done with, but it's good to know. Those students who are muggle-born and half-blood who join our house, the opportunity arises for you to inform them of these truths. I would appreciate it if you would tell them. Nazar smiles at him and nods. I will. Slughorn left him no useful material except for the textbooks Severus himself used to study potions. Preparing that summer for his first year of teaching would have been disastrous if he hadn't had access to a portrait who had also once been a teacher. Nazar has exacting standards that Severus appreciates, especially when potion classes begin and he is faced with idiots who think cauldron explosions are a lark. Then his role as as head of house and teaching eats up most of his time. Experimenting with potions over the summer eats up the rest. He doesn't want to think on what had been. If he is busy concentrating on other tasks, the past has less opportunity to nip at his heels. He discovers that he isn't a great teacher. He's not sure if it's because of the role he is playing and the appearance of hostility he still needs to maintain, or if he simply doesn't have the patience for it. The young dunderheads have books, though. If Severus could read them and learn, they have the same capacity. None of them are illiterate, even if they act like it. Severus earns his status as most hated teacher in the school by 1984, a new record. He earns his mastery by 1985, which is an amazing accomplishment considering his schedule, one fueled mostly by spite. He wishes he could take pride in or care about either achievement. It seems like no time at all has passed before it's 1991. Harry James Potter comes to Hogwarts on the 1st of September. Severus watches the rangy, underfed child, seeing the way his robes seem to hang off him despite being tailored to fit in London, and takes note of glasses that have been repaired more than once. Someone might have gone after them with magic, but the original fracture lines remain. Potter's eyes are emerald green, like Lily's had once been. In every other aspect, the boy is a pale-skinned reflection of his father, except James Potter had never looked so utterly baffled by everything around him. The boy is nearly a bloody hat stall until the hat finally shouts, "Gryffindor!" Severus tries not to grind his teeth. One more step towards a young Potter becoming like his father. Still, better that than Slytherin, where Potter would have been castigated, or worse, turned into the sort of creature that Voldemort became. Damn it, why couldn't the hat have chosen to put the child in Ravenclaw? It would have settled Severus's nerves. As the term progresses, Severus is more direly certain that James Potter decided to pass all of his worst traits to Harry Potter. Severus is also certain that Albus was stupid enough to place the child into Petunia Dursley's keeping, which might explain Potter's continued bewilderment in regards to the presence of regular meals. Maybe, Nazar says, after Severus voices his opinion, to the portrait once the Slytherins are at least in their dormitories for the evening, if not in bed. Worse traits, though. I think you're overlooking something, Severus. Oh? Severus tries not to roll his eyes. What would that be? From everything you told me, James Potter always trusted in the adults in this school to look after him, to have his back, maybe even to defend his misdeeds. Yes, Severus frowns. Damn it, you're right. Potter is the exact opposite. Lily would be horrified to see that her son has the same distrust of authority figures that Severus developed about 3 seconds after birth. Severus is appalled that he has any traits in common with Potter's spawn, but at least that isn't his fault. He is pretending to be a loyal, Vol- uh, he is a spy pretending to be loyal to Voldemort, and he still is not allowed to kill Petunia Dursley. He lives under some very stupid rules. Why do you hate this child so much? Nazar asked Severus in blatant amusement after Severus has been seething in front of the fireplace for at least a solid hour, striding back and forth as he rants aloud. To be honest, he's not certain what he's angry about, just that he is. He is bloody fucking furious. Because he is everything that was terrible about his father. The sins are passed from one generation to the next, then. Nazar gives him a wry look. The Christians of my time preached such, but I don't think this is what they meant, Severus. Severus pauses in front of the fireplace. I have to hate him, he murmurs. That was Voldemort housed in Quirrell's body. He's alive, Nazar. If I give any hint that I tolerate Potter's existence, Voldemort may attempt to. I might not be able to stand the brat, but I will not break my promise. I understand. Nazar waits for Severus to pace back and forth a few more times. You should find something that brings you joy. You have none in your life. Yes, I do, Severus replies, and then scowls to bite back the rest of the words. Brewing, while an enjoyable pastime, does not count. Severus feels his lips curl up in an unwilling smile. You bring me joy, he admits. I don't care if you're a mere portrait. You are a friend. Does that not count as a joy? Nazar is silent for a long time. Severus feels his heart hammering over that ridiculous confession. Finally, he forces himself to look up at the painting. Nazar has his hand pressed to the canvas again. I don't have anyone, he says, his eyes strangely vibrant. My family, my children, my friends, they're all gone. Yes, I think it counts as a joy. Severus lingers in the castle that summer and does his brewing in his own office. He spends more time in the evening in the portrait's company, finally understanding in Nazar's portrait when he can't find it anywhere else. Nazar is also not above verbally destroying him, which is far more entertaining than it should be. The school term resumes in September in grand fashion as Weasley and Potter crash a car into a fucking tree. Dressing down those two idiots on the first day of school, an entirely justified verbal evisceration is a pleasure. Weasley is, for once, more terrified of what Molly Weasley is going to do about him, to worry about Severus, and well, he should be. Potter is just terrified that he'll be sent home. The image Severus catches of barred windows is chilling, and leeches all of his enjoyment out of the process. He's grateful Minerva turns up at that moment to collect them, because he has no idea what in the hell he might say or do in response. After putting his thoughts in order, Severus goes to see Albus. Those bars have been both literal and symbolic. Potter isn't an Occlumens, but he is very good at burying things he truly doesn't want others to see. Yes, Otto reported to me on the barred windows after Molly informed him as to what the children found when illicitly retrieving him. Illicitly. The Weasleys were concerned when Harry wrote to no one over the summer, but it was Fred and George's idea to borrow the family car, Albus says. Severus doesn't slap his hand over his face, though it's a near thing, of course. It did solve the problem of the barred windows, as the twins chose to simply remove them. Albus gives him a thoughtful look. I'd request you cease using legitimacy against our students. But in Harry's case, it may be the only way we learn of anything of substance. I'm afraid Minerva and I didn't realize how fragile his trust in us could be. The events of last term, of not being available in my case, and in outright disbelieving him in Minerva's. I fear it will be a long time before he feels comfortable in actually confiding in us, if ever. Learned that lesson at last, did you? Severus asks in narrowed-eyed displeasure. I did have that feeling pointed out in terrible fashion, yes, Albus sighs. And the incident at King's Cross. The barrier sealed to them, that much is true. As to the theft of the car, Severus grinds his teeth. He truly hoped that it would be otherwise, and now he has to admit it. That was entirely Weasley's bird-brained idiocy, even if Potter acted as his accomplice. I look forward to the howlers that Molly is going to inflict upon her dunder-headed offspring. Mm. Ronald has some rather unfortunate influence in the matter of car theft from the twins. He might not be the only one receiving such correspondence. Albus frowns. In light of those bars, I believe I'll ask Minerva to hold off on informing Petunia and Vernon Dursley as to their nephew's antics. I don't wish to encourage a return of those bars. Severus shakes his head in disgust. He'd suspected Albus had placed that child with one of the worst people in existence aside from himself, and this confirms it. If you do, Petunia will only be disappointed that they didn't die in the crash. I'm sure concerned for her nephew. Petunia hated her family so much that she left them the moment she finished school, and her only other sight of them was as they lay in their respective caskets. Severus snaps at him, and then leaves Albus's office. One lesson learned, perhaps. So many others, not at all. Then some fool opens the Chamber of Secrets. Severus settles in for another year of hell in regards to trying to keep Potter away from being a complete Gryffindor. That boy is a parcel mouth, a bloody parcel mouth, Severus exclaims late that night, sitting on the common room sofa and staring at the flames in abject disbelief. Why does no one tell me these things? A Gryffindor parcel mouth? Oh, that must have everyone up in arms, Nazar observes drily. They think he's the one opening the Chamber of Secrets, don't they? Along with the accusations of Potter being the heir of Slytherin, Severus adds. Nazar laughs outright. Everyone's lost their bloody minds, just like last time. Severus looks up. Last time? Nazar nods. Hmm. In the 1940s, a parcel mouth opened the chamber and used its contents to murder a student. Myrtle was her name, I believe. Then some idiota decided that Rubeus Hagrid and his bloody pet Acromantula did the deed, despite the fact that the girl's manner of death was not caused by Acromantula venom. You mean Voldemort, Severus says, and then realizes he's gripping the mark on his arm so tightly that it hurts. He releases his hold and tries to shake the sensation back into his fingers. He was the only Parselmouth in the school at the time, so it's the logical conclusion, Nazar says. Convenient that Tom Marvolo Riddle was the one to expose the culprit, wasn't it? Convenient. Yes. Severus feels ill. You're certain that Potter isn't doing it. Given the fact that that child didn't even know he was speaking parcel tongue until everyone lost their fucking minds over a bit of hissing, Nazar nods. He's not your culprit, Severus, but his being a parcel mouth may be the means for you to find out who is opening this chamber. He's the only person who can understand the language aside from myself. And I can't exactly carry your portrait around the school, Severus says. No. Nazar hesitates. Carry a handheld mirror. Instead, use it around corners. Severus looks up at the portrait. Why? Nazar is cradling Kansa in his hands again, a faint crease marring his forehead. A suspicion, one that I desperately hope is incorrect. When the students have gone home for the summer, Severus goes to the common room. I hate you. Nazar looks up from what seems to be the uninterested contemplation of a book. Basilisk? Yes. Severus scowls down at the fireplace. You could have just said so. I wasn't sure. Do you know how desperately I wanted to be wrong? Severus, that basilisk was Kanza's brother. Severus blinks a few times and glances up. Kanza isn't anywhere in the frame or on Nazar's person. Kanza is a basilisk? He asks, horrified. And that reaction is why I don't tell anyone. It's even worse than mentioning you're a parcel mouth. I've looked that serpent in the eyes, Nazar. A basilisk is a pit viper. Nazar had given a true answer, if not the complete answer. Is it merely because she's a portrait that nothing untoward happens? No. Basilisks have two sets of eyelids. Nazar's shoulders are slumped in tired dismay. Basilisks are protectors, Severus. For this one to have acted in the manner it did, the Dark Lord, Severus realizes. Yes. Nazar peers at him. Dark Lord? Not Voldemort? After last term, I need to resume certain habits, Severus replies, thinking on what careful balancing act it was to both use and not use Voldemort's name. Kanza remembers having this sibling. She's a magical portrait, just as much as I am. Of course she does. Nazar shuts the book. And I wasn't certain if it was Jaloff until some of your Slytherins finally started uttering the word petrification in this room. I told them to tell you, since you've been understandably busy. I'm assuming they did not do so. I'll kill them, Severus growls. They're just children, Severus, and they were frightened, Nazar reminds him. I take it your Parselmouth found the culprit. Yes, a student being directly influenced by one of Voldemort's former possessions. Please tell me someone made that possession an ex-possession, Nazar says in a flat voice. Potter did, with the basilisk fang, while in the middle of dying from a basilisk bite, Severus replies. I currently owe my mental stability to the actions of a phoenix. Nazar stares at him. Severus, that child is insane, and it has nothing to do with his being a Gryffindor. I am aware of that. Thank you.